eReceipts is part of a set of emailed statements that Denari calls e-correspondence. All of the statements work in the same way in that they are based on the donor's preference. Each donor can decide whether they prefer emailed or printed receipts, and Denari will produce the version selected. The first step in the process is to set up an eReceipt template. It is a separate template from your printed receipt template, although it can look similar. Synergy staff will work with you to set up your template. It's important to remember that the eReceipt is an emailed receipt that the donor will receive in their email and may or may not print out. It is not a printed receipt that will be emailed as an attachment. Since the donor is responsible to print out the receipt, the look of the receipt will depend on their ability to print from their email program. Therefore, it's a good idea to keep the layout simple. The goal is to provide them with a tax statement and a thank you message. It will never look as good as your printed receipt when and if it's ever printed. Denari determines which donors will get printed or emailed receipts based on that donor's preference, and that can be selected by you internally, or the donor can make that selection through their online community account. So the next step is to set up the preferences for each donor. But first you must decide what your philosophy will be toward receipts. One option is to decide that all donors with an email address will get eReceipts whether they state that as their preference or not. Or you could decide that all donors will get printed receipts unless they tell you differently. We can set the global setting for either of those policies when setting up your template, and it can be changed later if needed. If no preference is set for a donor, Denari will default to the global setting. Let's assume now that all of your donors will get printed receipts unless they tell you they want the emailed version. There are several ways to solicit their preference. One might be to add a line to your printed receipt asking them to sign up for eReceipts by checking a box and providing you with their email address. You could also send an email to all of your donors for which you already have email addresses asking them to reply back if they want emailed receipts. There are, of course, a number of ways you can get that information. Once you know their preference, you're ready to set them up, and it's fairly simple. Go to the Names button here on the left, and then Name List Management, and select the donor's name record. From there, select e-correspondence emails on the right. If they don't already have an email address here, you can click Add New to add a new one. I'll just open one that's already here. You'll fill in the email address field here and then choose the type or status. And new simply means that the email address has never been used by Denari to send an email. Once that happens, it will change to active, but you can change it to active here too if you'd like. And then the last thing you need to do here is to hit the Make Primary button in the upper right top portion of the page here. If there is no Make Primary button on this page because this email address is already primary. The primary address is the one that Denari uses for eReceipts. Click Save to save this record. Now we can set the preference by selecting e-correspondence preferences on the right. Select the email address in the eReceipt field and choose the delivery method on the right. Again, click on Save. From now on, Denari will not produce a printed statement when you run receipts for this donor. You will run eReceipts from the batch screen. Let's go to the Gifts Pledges button and then Gift Batching, and we'll select a closed batch. At the top right, you see two buttons, eReceipts and Receipts. When you click the Receipts button, Denari will find those donors in the batch whose preference is set to printed only or both. If the donor has no preference set, Denari will use the global settings we mentioned earlier. It will then produce a printed receipts for only those donors. When you hit the eReceipts button, Denari will produce an email for each donor in that batch with that preference. However, the emails are not immediately sent. A job is created and is now waiting on your approval. The reason for the approval process is to give you a chance to review the statements before they're sent. To approve them, you'll go to the email button on the left and then eCorrespondence Job Queue. Here you will find the jobs that are waiting for approval. Under the View column, you see a link that says View Job. Click the link to review the receipts in that batch. Once you're satisfied that the job is ready to go, you can click anywhere in that row to open the approval form. Simply enter the approval code and click Approve Job at the top on the right. The emails are now being sent and there's no going back. They can't be retrieved at this point. So now you're probably asking, where do I get the approval code? Click the email button on the left and now eCorrespondence Control Record. In the Authorization Information section, you'll find the button to change the code. Click that and enter the new passcode or password. And now click on the Change Password button. While we're here, you'll notice some other fields. For example, there is the default eReceipt gift letter. For now, you can ignore these fields in this section. Denari uses the exact same process for letters in eReceipts as it does with printed receipts. It will use the letter body that you've selected in the gift record for this donation in the emailed receipt. So let me say that again just to be sure you understand. When you're entering gift records, you select a letter. Denari will use that letter in the eReceipt just as it does in the printed receipt. There are two fields in the default information for production and subscription correspondence section. The first, the From user, is what Denari will use in the From section of the email. It will help your donors quickly recognize that the email is not spam and is from you. You would normally put your company name here. The second field, Reply to Email, is the email address that will be used should the donor hit the reply button from the email. And then finally on this page we have Inactive Bounce Count. Bounces are emails that can be delivered for a variety of reasons, or can't be delivered for a variety of reasons. Some internet service providers and spam filters identify emails from the same address as spam when they are bounced several times, and that sender is then blacklisted. They will allow no other email from that sender forever. So you can put a limit on the number of bounces that can take place before Denari marks that email address as inactive so that no further attempts can be made. Usually a 1 or a 2 is a good number here. So how do you know when an email has bounced and who are the donors? Let's click on the email button again here on the left and then Smart Email Dashboard. Here you see a list of jobs that are awaiting approval in the upper left box. You can run them from here just as you did from the eCorrespondence page a moment ago. It does exactly the same thing. Below that you find the Recent Jobs box. This will list jobs that have been recently sent. We don't have any here since this is the demo company. But notice the columns: Sent On, Sent, Bounces, and Resend Bounces. When there is a job listed here, you'll find a number in the bounce column that shows you how many bounces there were from that job. You can click on that little number, which is really a link to that job, to see a report showing other information about the job. Click on the number in the bounce field and Denari will run another report showing the donors whose receipts have bounced. You can now take steps to correct the problem or change their preference to printed only so that they can continue to get receipts. Now, back again on the Smart Email Dashboard, you have a resend link, and that appears when you have bounces. Clicking that will resend that receipt. Of course, depending on the original problem that caused it to bounce, it may bounce again. Now, finally, you also have the ability to send a single receipt. You will find that link again by clicking the Email tab or Email button, and then click on Send Single eReceipt. Simply enter the receipt number here for the gift and that you want to send the receipt for, and click the Send eReceipt button at the top of the page here on the right. That will create a new job that will be waiting your approval. If you don't know the receipt number, you can go to the donor's gift history page to get that information. This concludes this video on eReceipts. If you have any questions, please contact tech support through the help button at the top of the Denari page.